अगला क्वेश्चन है, व्हाट इज द रैशनले बिहाइंड लिबरलाइजेशन स्ट्रेटजीज अडॉप्टेड बाय द न्यू इंडस्ट्रियल इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज। ओके, ठीक है। अगेन इसमें भी कुछ कुछ अच्छी बातें बताने के लिए मैं वो आपसे शेयर करता हूँ। हमसे पूछा है रैशनले बिहाइंड लिबरलाइजेशन स्ट्रेटजीज अडॉप्टेड बाय न्यू इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी। तो हम क्या करेंगे, इंट्रो देंगे। इंट्रो में हम बताएंगे कि जो न्यू इंडस्ट्रियल न्यू इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी है, जो कि इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी भी कहते हैं, ये 1991 में आई। ठीक है, क्यों आई? बिकॉज इंडिया का जो बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट था वो काफी डेफिसिट हो गया था। ठीक है, तो हम लोग ने वर्ल्ड बैंक से लोन लिया, और वर्ल्ड बैंक और आईएमएफ से लोन लिया, और उसके बाद क्या कहते हैं, हम लोग ने अपनी कंपनी पर हमसे शर्तें रखी गई कि लिबरलाइजेशन प्राइवेटाइजेशन आपको करना पड़ेगा। राइट, लिबरलाइजेशन तो एटलीस्ट करना ही पड़ेगा। तो यानी ये हमारे लिए नेगेटिव बात थी कि पिछले 7 सदी या डेकेड का जो भी हमारी इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसीज थी वो हमें इस पॉइंट पे ले आई। बट हमें ये नहीं लिखना है, हमें पॉजिटिवली लिखना है। तो मैं आपको यही बात बता रहा था कि हर चीज को पॉजिटिवली लिखिए। ठीक है, बट गलत बात नहीं, फैक्चुअल बात, एक नजरिया वाली बात है, पर्सपेक्टिव वाली बात है। ठीक है, तो इसलिए आप क्वेश्चन को भी देखिए, रैशनले बिहाइंड लिबरलाइजेशन स्ट्रेटेजी। तो अब देखिए इसको हम कितनी नाइसली डन करेंगे। यानी हमें रीजन देना क्या कहते हैं, लिबरलाइजेशन के लिए। ठीक है, देता हूं। तो भाई सबसे पहले बात करते हैं, लिबरलाइजेशन हुआ तो क्यों हम, रैशनले क्या है? फर्स्ट, टू इंटीग्रेट विद वर्ल्ड मार्केट। राइट, यानी हम वर्ल्ड मार्केट से जुड़ना चाहते हैं। ये लिबरलाइजेशन का हमारा रैशनले है ना। दूसरी चीज कि भाई हम बता सकते हैं इसमें कि हमें ना टेक्नोलॉजी, अब क्या हुआ, लिबरलाइजेशन हुआ, उससे क्या हुआ, जो फॉरेन ट्रेड है इंडिया की वो इम्प्रूव कर गई। यानी इंपोर्ट कोटा था वो हट गया, लाइसेंसिंग टैरिफ रिड्यूस हो गए। ठीक है, लाइसेंस राज जो चलता आ रहा था इंडिया में वो हट गया। तो ऐसे ऐसे कुछ कुछ इंप्रूवमेंट हुए। तीसरा, हम बता सकते हैं कि टेक्नोलॉजिकली एडवांसमेंट हुआ। कैसे? बाहर की जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज नेशंस की जो टेक्नोलॉजी है उसको हमने इंपोर्ट किया, यानी टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट हुआ। राइट, चौथी चीज हम ये भी बता सकते हैं कि जो फॉरेन एक्सचेंज इंडिया का था वो कंट्रोल था, वो डी कंट्रोल हो गया। यानी रुपी नाउ इज फ्री टू बी, द वैल्यू ऑफ रुपी जो है वो मार्केट फोर्सेस पे डिपेंड कर गई। ठीक है, पांचवी चीज के बाहर की कंट्रीज आई, कंपनीज आएंगी तो फिर हमारा इंडिजिनसली जो इंडस्ट्रीज है वो डेवलप होंगी, क्योंकि देयर इज अ सेंस ऑफ कंपटीशन, है ना। तो आप समझ रहे हैं कि उसी चीज को बात वही है, बट एक ना पॉजिटिव एस्पेक्ट है, क्योंकि सवाल में वो पूछा है व्हाट इज द रैशनले बिहाइंड लिबरेशन स्ट्रेटजी। सवाल में ये पूछा है कि क्या हुआ है। ठीक है, तो ऐसे अपने आंसर को आप बहुत अच्छा बना सकते हैं। ठीक है, कोई नहीं, हम आगे बढ़ते हैं और अगले सवाल पे आते हैं। अगला सवाल है, द टर्म ग्लोबलाइजेशन assume increasing importance in the today's economic balance. Explain this statement in the context of Indian economy. ठीक है, तो क्या पूछा है, ग्लोबलाइजेशन के बारे में पूछा है। इसने, इसके इंपॉर्टेंस बढ़ गई है इन टुडेस टेक्नो इकोनॉमिक बैलेंस। बैलेंस माने क्या होता है? बैलेंस माने मैंने हिंदी में ही देखा, मुझे नहीं पता था इसका मतलब था शब्दावली। चलो कोई बात नहीं। एक्सप्लेन दिस स्टेटमेंट इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ इंडियन इकोनॉमी। ठीक है, अगेन ग्लोबलाइजेशन की इंपॉर्टेंस पूछी है इंडियन इकोनॉमी के कंटेक्स्ट में। ठीक है, यही पूछना चाह रहे हो। तो फर्स्ट इसमें हम क्या करेंगे, ग्लोबलाइजेशन को डिफाइन करेंगे कि इट इज द प्रोसेस ऑफ रैपिड इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ द इंडियन इकोनॉमी विद द वर्ल्ड मार्केट। द मेजर ड्राइवर इज द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, इज द इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी। ठीक है, तो ऐसे कुछ कुछ नाइस इंट्रो देंगे, उसके बाद हम इसकी इंपॉर्टेंस लिखेंगे। ठीक है, अगेन आप इसमें देखिएगा कैसे स्पेक्ट्रम का ध्यान रख रहे हैं कि अलग अलग चीजों को लिखा जा रहा है, सेम बात को रिपीट नहीं किया जा रहा है। ठीक है, तो कंपटीशन जो है वो बढ़ गया ग्लोबलाइजेशन से, यानी कंपटीशन बढ़ गया, इससे क्या हुआ, क्वालिटी बढ़ गई। जो भी प्रोडक्ट्स बन रहे हैं उसकी क्वालिटी बढ़ गई। ठीक है, और प्राइस में भी फिर एक सिग्निफिकेंट चेंज आ गया। सेकंड हम लिख सकते हैं कि भाई अगेन एडवांसमेंट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी को हम यहाँ यूज कर सकते हैं कि भाई इंपोर्ट हुआ, टेक्नोलॉजी इंपोर्ट हुआ। ठीक है, तीसरी चीज हम लिख सकते हैं, जैसे अगर मैं कीवर्ड की बात करूं तो हम आउटसोर्सिंग वर्ड यूज कर सकते हैं कि इंडिया जो है वो मेजर मेजर आउटसोर्सिंग वो बन गया, हब बन गया। फॉर एग्जांपल सॉफ्टवेयर इंडस्ट्रीज में इंडिया बहुत अच्छी सर्विसेज प्रोवाइड करता है, इतने सारे बीपीओ हैं, कितने सारे सॉफ्टवेयर सॉल्यूशंस कंपनीज हैं। या फिर हम बोल सकते हैं आपका डेटा सेंटर, इंडिया बेंगलोर में कितने सारे डेटा सेंटर बन गए हैं। ठीक है, तो इंडिया एक बहुत अच्छा आउटसोर्सिंग लोकेशन बन गया। ठीक है, और चौथी चीज बोल सकते हैं हम कि एफडीआई जो है ग्लोबलाइजेशन से लिबरलाइजेशन से एफडीआई आया इंडिया में, और काफी मतलब अभी शायद $84 बिलियन का कैपिटल इनफ्लो आया, आप चेक करिएगा इसको। तो ऐसे ना करंट अफेयर से भी आप इसको जोड़ सकते हैं। ठीक है, एक और अच्छा पॉइंट कि ग्लोबलाइजेशन से इंडियन इकोनॉमी में क्रॉस कल्चरल एक्सचेंज आया, बट चूंकि इंडियन इकोनॉमी के कल्चर में कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बताना है तो मैं बताऊंगा जो इंडियन हैंडीक्राफ्ट्स और ट्रेडिशनल इंडस्ट्रीज है इनका भी बाहर एक्सपोर्ट चालू हो गया। ठीक है, इनका भी बाहर एक्सपोर्ट चालू हो गया, और अब कोई अच्छा सा स्कीम या अच्छा सा वो भी आप कोट कर सकते हैं यहाँ पर। ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से 7 मार्क्स के आंसर को आप कर लिख सकते हैं। ठीक है, हम आगे बढ़ते हैं और नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन पे आते हैं, विच इज टॉकिंग अबाउट आईसीसी। क्या है? डिस्कस द वेरियस इनिशिएटिव्स अंडरटेकन बाय इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स टू प्रमोट बोथ नेशनल एंड इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड। ठीक है, वेरियस इनिशिएटिव्स है विच इज इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स ने अंडरटेक किए हैं, किसको प्रमोट करने के लिए? नेशनल को और इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड को। ठीक है, हमें बताने हैं। तो अगेन अगेन इस क्वेश्चन में हम इंट्रो से चालू करेंगे और हम नाइसली डिफाइन करेंगे चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स को, कि चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स पहले तो होता क्या है, कि ये एसोसिएशन ऑफ बिजनेसेस है एंड इट्स सर्व एज अ प्रेशर ग्रुप जो कि रिप्रेजेंट करता है बिजनेस कम्युनिटी को। ठीक है, अब इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स कब बना? 1925 में बना। अगर आपके पास ये फैक्चुअल इंफॉर्मेशन है तो आप उसको जरूर लिखिए कि 1925 में बना, और इसके बाद इसका कुछ कुछ क्या कहते हैं, जो भी हेडक्वार्टर वगैरह आप कोलकाता में लिख सकते हैं। ठीक है, बहुत नाइस छोटा सा इंट्रो। उसके बाद आप क्वेश्चन के कंटेक्स्ट पे आते हैं। क्वेश्चन का कंटेक्स्ट है कि क्या क्या इनिशिएटिव्स इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स ने लिए टू प्रमोट बोथ नेशनल एंड इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड, यानी नेशनल ट्रेड को प्रमोट करने के लिए क्या क्या किया और इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड को प्रमोट करने के लिए क्या क्या किया, इसकी बात करनी है हमें। ठीक है, हम कोशिश करते हैं इसके आंसर को लिखने की। तो सबसे पहले हम लिख सकते हैं कि नेशनल के, जैसे इसी की बात है कि रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ बिजनेस एसोसिएशन, तो हम लिख सकते हैं कि इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स एक अच्छा पॉइंट ऑफ कांटेक्ट है बिटवीन ट्रेड यूनियन एंड अदर स्टेक होल्डर्स विच आर गवर्नमेंट, राइट। तो ये अच्छा पॉइंट ऑफ कांटेक्ट है। सेकेंडली गवर्नमेंट डीलिंग जो है वो चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स के थ्रू इजी हो सकती है। ठीक है, या फिर बताऊं मैं कि गवर्नमेंट जो भी गवर्नमेंट का क्या कहते हैं, गवर्नमेंट का जो भी नया लॉ आया, जैसे लेबर कोड आया है अभी, अब उसको समझाने के लिए किसी चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स ने उसका एक बहुत अच्छा एक्सप्लेनेशन बनाया। ठीक है, कुछ चेंजेस करे हैं, तो उसको लेके ना एक अवेयरनेस भी प्रोवाइड कर सकते हैं। तो गवर्नमेंट रेगुलेशंस या फिर जो भी रूल्स हैं उसको लेके अवेयरनेस का भी इंतजाम इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स कर सकता है। ठीक है, तीसरी चीज क्या कर सकता है कि तीसरी चीज कर सकता है कि ऑल्टरनेटिव डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन मैकेनिज्म दे सकता है, कि रादर देन गोइंग टू द कोर्ट आपने खुद ही इन हाउस इतने वो कर दिए हैं, क्या कहते हैं, इतने मतलब खुद ही इन हाउस आपने इतना अच्छा मैकेनिज्म बनाया है कि एक स्पीडी आपको वो मिल रहा है, सॉल्यूशन मिल रहा है, लीगल सॉल्यूशन मिल रहा है। ठीक है, तो ऑल्टरनेटिव डिसीजन लिख सकता हूं मैं, डिस्प्यूट रिजोल्यूशन। चौथी चीज की मैं बात कर सकता हूं तो क्या बोल सकता हूँ कि कई सारे फॉरेन ट्रेड पॉलिसी अभी गवर्नमेंट की 2020 तक थी, अब ये 21 से बार बार लेट हो रही है, तो इसमें कई सारे चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स को असिस्ट कर सकता है गवर्नमेंट को। तो असिस्ट गवर्नमेंट इन मेकिंग फॉरेन ट्रेड पॉलिसी, राइट, कि कैसे हम इंडियन को वो कर सकते हैं, राइट, इंडियन ट्रेड को प्रमोट कर सकते हैं। ऐसे ऐसे आप ना लिख सकते हो। ओके, अब हम बात करते हैं इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड को प्रमोट करने के लिए क्या किया जा सकता है। तो अब आप सोचिए, एक तो यही काम किया जा सकता है कि इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स क्या कर सकता है कि जगह जगह जाके फेयर फेयर वो कर सकता है, ऑर्गेनाइज कर सकता है, कि ट्रेड फेयर लगा दिया, कभी टेक्सटाइल का लगा दिया, कभी केमिकल्स का लगा दिया, कभी फर्टिलाइजर का लगा दिया। जैसे अभी अगस्त में आपका सियोल में, जो कि साउथ कोरिया की कैपिटल है, वहां पे टेक्सटाइल का वो हुआ है। ठीक है, तो ऑर्गेनाइजिंग फेयर्स, राइट, तो उसको एग्जाम्पल को आप कोट कर सकते हो। ठीक है, सेकेंडली आप लिख सकते हो कि वेरियस कंट्रीज के साथ आपने वहां के चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स के साथ आपने एमओयू साइन कर लिया, या वहां की गवर्नमेंट के साथ ही साइन कर लिया फॉर दैट मैटर, है ना, विद द परमिशन ऑफ गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, है ना, तो आपने एमओयू साइन कर लिया। तीसरी चीज के आपका इकोनॉमिक पब्लिकेशन ऑफ डिफरेंट डिफरेंट कंट्रीज कर दिया, कि मतलब यहाँ पे इकोनॉमी की कंडीशन क्या है, कि साउथ कोरिया में इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन क्या है, इसमें उसका एक रिसर्च पेपर आपने कंडक्ट करा दिया, ठीक है। बाय द वे रिसर्च की बात यहाँ भी हो सकती है, ठीक है, कि आपने स्टेट लेवल पे या फिर कंट्री लेवल पे उस मार्केट को रिसर्च कर दिया, एक सेकेंडरी रिसर्च आपने इनपुट दे दिया, राइट। तो इस तरीके से कर सकते हैं। या अलग अलग कंट्रीज में इन्वेस्टमेंट कैसे हो रहा है, तो ऐसे आप इस आंसर को बना सकते हैं, ठीक है। अब ना एक बात मैं आपको और शेयर करना चाहता हूँ कि अब देखिए ये चीज ना, कि ये ना चैप्टर, ये ऐसी चीज नहीं है कि आप बुक पढ़ रहे हैं तो आपको एक चैप्टर मिल जाएगा। इसके लिए ना आपको डायनामिकली पढ़ना पड़ेगा। यानी मैं आपको बताता हूँ, जैसे मैं इस चीज की इंफॉर्मेशन कहाँ से निकालूंगा, मैं गया गूगल पे, मैंने कुछ नहीं किया, मैंने इंडियन चैम्बर ऑफ कॉमर्स डाल दिया, ठीक है। अब इसको लेके जो भी मुझे अपने नोट्स बनाने हैं, जो भी मैं पढ़ाई करनी है, सब इसमें मिल रहा है मेरे को, कि ये मुझे पता चल गया सिंस 2025 इसकी हिस्ट्री पता चल गई, इवेंट्स पता चल गए, करंट इवेंट्स पता चल गए, है ना। तो ये करंट इवेंट्स है कि बैंकिंग सबमिट कर रहा है, ऑल एनर्जी सबमिट कर रहा है ऑस्ट्रेलिया में, और पावर एनर्जी अफ्रीका में। तो ऐसे ना आप अपने एग्जाम्पल सिलेक्ट कर लीजिए और देखिए, और देखिए इंटरनेशनली क्या कर रहा है। जैसे मैं इंटरनेशनल पे जाऊंगा तो इंटरनेशनल बिजनेस न्यूज पे मिल जाएगी आपको, कंट्री रिपोर्ट मिल जाएगी आपको। तो ऐसे ना आपको अपने क्या कहते हैं, ऐसे ना आपको इस पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक के या फिर जो भी ये अनकन्वेंशनल टॉपिक्स है ना, आप ऐसे अपने नोट्स बना सकते हो।
Right. So the question is, describe the 4 cultural predispositions that MNCs are likely to adopt towards managing employees in global context. So this is basically a 5-marker question. All right. So, and before start writing an answer, we have to pick the keywords around which the answer would revolve. All right. So here the keywords are the cultural predispositions, and first of all we need to understand that the question is asking about managing employees, because cultural predispositions can be used for various strategies like marketing strategies and financial strategies. So the answer should focus on these 2 things. Now, to write an answer, you have to first introduce your answer by, making a little background about the need of cultural predispositions. You can state such as the transnational nature of MNCs, all right, and the need for the MNCs to culturally acclimatize themselves when they are working internationally. All right. So after introducing your answer, like within 2 lines, you can start by explaining the predispositions. So here, one more thing, like by explaining the predispositions, you have to also explain them with the help of certain examples which are specifically related to management of employees or the human resources. All right, so that the examiner gets the point that yes, you have actually understood the question, you are actually answering your question in the particular context in which the question has been asked. All right. So, starting with the predispositions, there are 4 predispositions you must have read in all your standard book hits. So, in this case, number 1 would be the ethnocentric predisposition. In ethnocentric predisposition, what happens is the parent company's own cultural practices, they predominate their strategic decisions. All right, parent company's own culture. Next one is polycentric predisposition. Now, what is this polycentric predisposition? Here, the host companies' cultural practices, they predominate the strategic decisions, the strategic decisions relating to the management of the human resources or the employees. All right. You can also state examples in these cases. For example, you can take the example of the retirement age. For example, in India, the retirement age is 58 years generally, and maximum retirement age basically is found in Ireland, which is 69 years of age of retirement. So by stating such kind of examples, you can actually enrich your answer. All right, within 2 lines, because this is only a 5-marker question. The next one is regiocentric. What regiocentric predisposition is about? It is basically blending the cultural interests of the host plus the parent company. Parent plus the host company, both of their cultures, actually a mix of them, they predominates the strategic decisions. Now the fourth one is geocentric. Now what is geocentric? Geocentric is basically adopting the best of all the cultures around the world and then making their strategies for managing their employees or the human resources in the organization. This is why, because it is a mix of the cultures of around the world, the best of the cultures. So we call it global system approach also. It is also called as global systems approach. Now finally, after explaining all these four predisposition, you can finally conclude your answer by stating the actual practices or actual predispositions which are being followed generally by the MNCs. It is not the case like particular MNC would focus on one particular predisposition. So basically what happens is the MNCs actually they use the mix of all the predispositions which are actually best suited for the environment in which the organization is working. So this would be your answer for this question. All right. Okay. So the next question is, how does Hofstede's model on cultural dimensions equip international managers with an understanding of cultures across countries? So the first thing that we would notice here is that it is a 10-marker question. And the next thing is the keywords, which is Hofstede's model and how it helps the international managers with an understanding of the cultures across countries. All right. So while introducing the answer, we can actually give a background of why the Hofstede model is important for the international managers. Why? Because it becomes very important for an organization which is working on a transnational or a multinational level to compare the similarities and dissimilarities of the cultures between their own country's culture and the culture of the country where their organization is going to be set up or where the organization is actually working. So Hofstede actually introduced this model on cultural dimensions in 1970s. Right, after studying over 50 countries, and he studied the employees who work for IBM. And after like a decade of the research, he actually came down to 4 cultural dimensions, which actually helped in understanding the similarities and dissimilarities between various work cultures in different countries. All right. Later on, with the help of 2 other scholars, which were Michael Harris Bond and Michael Minkoff, he introduced 6 other dimensions. Sorry, 2 others dimensions. So in total, there were 6 dimensions that you would write in your answer for this. All right. So for this question, like while answering, if you use the dimensional diagram, that would be very effective and interesting for the examiner to read. All right. So the dimension model here would be like one dimension is high and another one is low. Now there are 6 dimensions that will be writing. All right. So the first one here is power distance. Now the countries which are high on power distance, they actually embrace hierarchy. That is, they like to work in a hierarchical manner. For example, yeah, one more thing, like by mentioning the dimensions, you can actually, cite various examples for that. For example, in case of this hierarchy, such as countries like India, China, they follow this hierarchical culture. All right. And other countries also, such as many Latin American countries and many African countries also work in this manner. So basically the idea here is that these countries, they actually accept the power differences and inequalities. All right, they have high respect for rank and authority. And the countries which are low on this dimension, they actually are egalitarian. They're actually egalitarian in nature. That means they avoid hierarchical structures and they are basically centralized in nature. So example of countries you can cite here are the countries such as Scandinavian countries, basically Denmark, Ireland, etc. All right. So with each dimension, if you would substantiate the explanation of each dimension with options, that would actually enrich your answer. So next, moving on to the next dimension, first one was the power distance. Next one is the collectivism versus individualism. Now, what is this? In individualism, what happens is importance is given to the goals and the well-being of the individual himself. That is, the focus is on self, or we can say personal goals. And the countries which are of collectivist nature, or which are on the collectivism side of the dimension, they actually focus, or they actually give importance to the goals of the group or the well-being of the group. So here also, for example, the countries which focus on the individualistic pattern, these are the countries such as USA, Canada, etc. And the countries which are of collectivist nature, they are the most of the times the Latin American countries or the Asian countries, basically. So the collectivist countries, they focus on the sense of belongingness. So one major difference is that they focus on the we feeling, and these focus on the I feeling. All right. The next dimension here is uncertainty avoidance model. Or we can say index, uncertainty avoidance index. Now the countries which are high on this index, they are uncomfortable with uncertainty. So they have very low intolerance for uncertainty or ambiguity, or they wants to avoid taking risk. All right. They follow strict rules so that they can avoid risk in that. All right. Uncomfortable for risk, basically. And the countries which are low on this index, they consider uncertainty as a natural thing, and they consider uncertainty is very important in a business, because risk taking is a thing which actually every business wants to has to opt for. All right, so these are basically called as risk takers in that manner. All right, the next in this dimensional model is feminism or femininity versus masculinity. Now here it is also referred to as tough versus tender. In masculinity, power is given very much importance. Countries such as Mexico, Italy, Japan, they have very tough values. They actually value tough, features, or the value system such as ambition, power, assertiveness. These values are basically preferred there. So basically tough values are preferred. All right. In cases where feminism or femininity is, followed, tender values are followed. Tender values such as empathy, compassion, and here one more thing, the gender roles are very fluid and flexible as compared to the masculinity and dimension of the index. All right. So the next one is short term versus long term. Now the state that the countries which are which focus on the long term dimension of the index, they are futuristic in nature. They focus on future. Then they focus on the long term success. All right. And they value the values which are preferred here are such as perseverance, persistency. All right, like that. So they are basically futuristic in nature. And the countries which are on the short term side of dimension, they are basically traditional in nature, and they focus on the near future, and they have emphasis on quick results. All right. Now, the last in this is indulgence versus restraint. What is this? Restraint is basically submission of your urge to gratify your needs basically. So here there is a kind of repression, normative, we can say normative repression is being followed here, because it actually, the countries which are on the restraint side of the model, they actually regulate the gratification through social norms. All right, they have little emphasis on leisure time or enjoyment time in their work cultures. And countries such as Russia or India, or we can say South Korea, these are the countries who have very low indulgence resistant restraint score on them. All right, in case of indulgence, these are the countries where they say that satisfaction is actually good. So they basically promote the gratification of your needs or your urges. All right, satisfaction is good in this case. So basically, these are the countries such as US, or we can say Canada, France, and as I told you here, the countries such as India, for that matter, Russia, South Korea. So these are the countries. So basically the idea is that you should actually provide one or two examples of the countries also, which actually would substantiate your answer and would enrich it, and the answer would actually become attractive for the examiner. All right. So in conclusion also, you can give in one or two lines regarding the importance of this model basically, and how different countries actually follow this model to acclimatize themselves to the new countries' cultures where they are going to operate or where they are already operating. All right. So the question is, identify the linkages between primary and secondary activities of Porter's value chain model. I hope everyone is very well aware of this Porter's value chain model. First of all, let us see how much marks of the question is. It is a 5-marker question. So how would we address this question? How would we finally try to answer this? All right. So first of all, we will tell something about, or a little introduction about, what is a value chain model, and then we will define what are the basic what are the defined primary and secondary activities, and then we will explain the linkages between both of them with the help of certain examples. All right. So let us start with explaining what a Porter's value chain model is. So in 1985, Michael Porter gave this concept of value chain in his book Competitive Advantage. All right. Now, what actually, prompted him to introduce such a model of value chain? Because what happened is he actually felt the need to identify the activities within the firm that actually contributed to the firm's competitive advantage, or maybe for the cost reduction stuff, and those which were not actually contributing to that stuff. So basically, he tried to identify, or tried the organizations to help identify those certain activities which actually lead to the final, the value being created by that firm or the organization. Now, what finally he did for that purpose, he broke the activities, or he broke the whole organization of the firm into various and kind of activities, small activities, ranging from the procurement of raw material to the final stage of delivery of goods, and thereafter also like the after sales services which is being provided by the firm. So all of these activities in a firm, these were being divided into various parts, and what was the actual purpose behind dividing them was to see how that internal organization can be made to work in the best way to gain that competitive advantage, and to finally create a differentiation between their product and the product of their competitors. All right. So what finally the approach which was being used by him, it was basically breaking the firm into certain primary and secondary activities. There were in total 5 primary activities and 4 secondary activities. All right. And finally, he wanted to see whether through these primary and secondary activities, the value which was being created was actually greater than equal to the cost which was being incurred or not. So basically this was his purpose, to introduce this value chain model. And finally, after analyzing this, where the later on the analysis was actually conducted to see where are the areas of improvement, what are the areas of improvement where certain kind of improvement can be made and more value could be generated, which could actually excel the costs. All right. So now we would, and I would also advise you people to, draw the diagram, which is a very basic and a very famous diagram of this value chain. So you must draw that in your examination. So let us just try to do that here. We will just first draw the diagram, and later on we will be explaining what all activities are being introduced here. All right. So there were 4 primary activities. First is inbound logistics. Inbound logistics. Second is operations. Third is outbound logistics. Then here it is marketing and sales. And finally the services. All right. So these all are basically called as the primary activities of the firm or the organization. All right. So what is inbound logistics? Inbound logistics actually included basically the functions such as warehousing, transportation, material handling, such kind of stuff. All right, stuff. Now the operations part, it actually included the standardized model of production and how the manufacturing or assembling or packaging is done of the product. This comes under the operations part. Then comes the outbound logistics. Outbound logistics is basically the order processing and the final delivery of the goods to the retailers and then to the customers. Now comes the marketing and sales. Marketing and sales included pricing, brand building, all right, advertising, all this stuff comes under marketing and sales part. Then comes the services. Services part actually included delivery, installation, repair, grievance handling, all such stuff comes under the service part of the primary activity. All right. And next we will do the secondary activities. See here it was given like firm's infrastructure. Firm's infrastructure, that includes the management, finance, the legal and the other planning aspects of the firm. Then comes the HRM, that includes, everybody knows about it. It includes the training, recruitment, and then the performance appraisal, such the such functions of managing the HR in the organization. Then comes the technological development part. What is this technological development? It is basically integrated, creating the integrated supply chain, and then the real-time sales information, providing the real-time sales information, such and such kind of parts in the technological development stuff. And then comes the procurement part, which includes communication with the suppliers, purchase of the supplies and materials. That all comes under the procurement stuff. Now these activities were actually called as the secondary activities. Secondary, or we can say the support activities. Now why this naming of such activities? Why these activities have been named such as primary and the secondary activities? Because these are the activities, these 4 activities actually supports the primary activities. Now a very important thing here, you must concentrate on this thing, because this is this thing which has been asked in the question. Now, according to you, have you ever, bothered about why these dotted lines are there? Have you ever even, noticed it in your books? So basically, these dotted lines, these actually represents the linkages between these activities, the linkages, all right? So this is what the question has asked. So why I have made you understand this diagram is so finally make you understand what are the actual linkages between them. Now, because this is a 5-marker question, you do not have to explain all the things in detail. You give just this diagram and then just explain for these are the primary activities, these are the secondary activities or the support activities, and then finally you can move on to explaining the linkages part here. Now, what are the linkages? What the linkages actually suggest. So idea behind basically the linkages is that the activities, whether these are the secondary or the primary activities, they are not independent or they are not mutually exclusive. The activities are interdependent. Interdependence means there is an interdependence between the activities. That means how the way one activity is done would affect the cost or the performance or the other activity. The way one activity is done affects the performance, or we can say the cost of other activities. Now the linkages is fine between the primary and primary activities and between the primary and the secondary activity. But the question has asked about primary and secondary activities. So with the help of an example, we would try to explain this only. All right. So what could be the examples for that? You can actually, create your own example here, real life examples, or you can find various examples in your standard books also. So these are very, real life examples. If you give, that would make your answer very, what we say, enriched in a certain way. All right. So here we can give the example of primary and secondary activities, such as the primary activity of operations is being affected by the secondary activity of, such as HRM, training of employees. If we do not have enough trained employees, or we do not have made a recruitment of employees with some standard qualifications, that would actually is going to affect the operations, that is production of the product. There would be a compromised quality in that. So this is the kind of leakage that you have to make the examiner understand with the help of your examples. One more thing is with HRM, it can affect the various kind of primary activities, such as it can affect the operations part, then it can affect the marketing and the sales part also, because if the salesman is not much trained, he would not be able to make the the standard or the target sales in of the organization. Obviously, other examples also, other primary activities example also you can take, such as the marketing and sales. We can say this could be affected by the secondary activity of technological development. How? Because if the technology is not actually, has developed to a level of, there is no digital capability of the organization, it would actually affect the marketing and the sales in the manner that it would affect the online marketing of the products, or the online platforms of the product, or the real-time purchase system of the website of the organization. So these are some kind of linkages through which you can make the the examiner understand that you have fully understood the meaning of linkages. So it is the best way possible to explain the linkages with the help of an example. All right. So this was question number 6, part C1. All right. Moving on to the next one. How is value chain analysis conducted, and explain it with the help of an example. See, because this is also 5-marker question. In total, question number 6, part C is basically 15 marker. These are the sub parts of that. So it is a 5-marker question. Now, how would you approach this question? First of all, you have to focus on this value chain analysis, which we have already introduced in the previous question, but make sure that introduction of this part of your question should not overlap with the introduction of your previous part. How? Here, you would not tell the the meaning of value chain analysis. Rather, in introduction, you can actually tell the need of value chain analysis. What is the need of value chain analysis? Basically, it in general terms, you can tell that it helps optimize the efforts and it helps in eliminating the wastage in the organization being done and improve the final profitability and competitive. It gets competitive advantage to the firm where it can differentiate itself from the other firms. All right. So this was a mere introduction. Then it was value chain analysis conducted. Then the example is a very important thing which has already been asked in the question, and focus on an example. So take the example of one firm or one company. Do not go into like with each activity you are giving example of various other organizations. Take one example, one company, like I will be taking right now while explaining, and then you do that. All right. So the value chain analysis, how is it conducted? First is you have given the introduction telling the importance, all right, the need you have told in 1 or 2 lines. Secondly, what we do is we will tell the process, how the value chain analysis is conducted. How is it conducted? It is conducted through a 3-step process. All right. Now, with each of the following steps, you will be providing examples so that it becomes interesting for the examiner to understand. Now, what is the 3-step process? Number 1, which one is the number 1 step? Breaking down the firm's activities, the firm into smaller activities. This is the number 1 step in the value chain analysis. All right. How? Now, I am taking an example of the Apple company or the Apple firm which produces iPhones and iWatches, etc. So, breaking down the firm into smaller activities. So, here I am taking the example of the firm Apple, all right, which produces iPhones and Apple laptops, etc. So, basically, what happens is we will take an example with each of the following steps, all right, which each of the 3 steps here. So, first, breaking down of the activities, what it is, like I have already told you, breaking down of activities into primary and the secondary ones. And then finally, why is it done? Because here, the function of each activity is analyzed on a granular level, which can actually tell us what are the core competencies or deficiencies of each activity so that we can accordingly work upon them. All right. So here let us take the example of Apple firm's primary and secondary activities, such as let us take the example of inbound logistics of Apple. See, Apple considers its supply chain to be very important. All right, you can cite the sub activities examples also, such as in inbound logistics. You can take the example of supply chain, because the purpose only is the smaller activities, and you can actually divide them into sub-activities as well. All right, smaller activities, you are dividing them. And in the primary activity of inbound logistics, you move on to the supply chain. So here you will be explaining, like I'm explaining here, with the help of an example of Apple, you can actually take the example of any kind of firm. All right. So here, the supply chain of Apple is considered to be very enormous, and they consider it as their core competency. All right, because they maintain strict standards. Quality standards for their suppliers, and every year the list of the suppliers is revised, and only those who actually meet these standards are being kept. They are being added to the list, and others are being rejected. So they maintain a set standard of the quality of their suppliers. So this is the example of inbound logistics. Similarly, you can take example of other primary activities and their sub activities. For example, let me take an example of service here. For example, in service, you can tell that they provide 1 year warranty and also the 90 days support from the staff. So this is the service, and the primary and the sub-primary activity we can call the sub-activity of primary activity is the service part. There is this 1 year warranty and this 90-day support from the staff period it is given. So these are basically the example how the primary activities and their sub activities are being considered and found out the core competencies out of them. All right. Here I have given the example of the two of the primary activities. Similarly, you can take example to enrich your answer of some of the secondary activities also of the Apple. For example, very interesting one, HRM. HRM. In HRM, Apple in 2020 was actually being rewarded as the, in 2019, Apple was being crowned as the most admired company for their HR practices. All right. And in technological advancement also similarly, you can take that every year they introduce new products. For example, in 2020, I guess almost 28 new products were being launched by Apple in the market. So these are the primary and secondary activities and their sub activities and how they are actually, taking out their competencies in each of the activities. All right. So these are the things. Here I have given the example of primary. Here I am giving the example of the secondary or the support activities. So this is the way you would proceed with your first step of the process, which is breaking down the form into smaller activities. Now, the next step would be, I'm writing it here. The next step is examining the linkages between the activities. See, I have already told you in the previous question only how they have been linked. They are interdependent and not independent. And also the strength and weakness of one activity would obviously influence the, the performance or the cost of the other activity. So, here also you can give example. For example, as in the previous question we have taken, the training of the technicians in Apple, if that is not up to the mark, the product quality would not be up to the mark, and that would in turn obviously would affect the operations, all right, the production, the quality, and then and that in turn can affect also the service part in the primary activity, where you have to bear the cost of the repairs and various kind of grievances that you would have to handle. So these are the kind of linkages that kind of the example of linkages that you can provide. Also, in case of technological gap, or we can say there is a lag in the operations, which can actually affect the service cost, as I have told you right now. So various kind of examples you can give in. Here you are not restricted to provide the example of linkage between the primary and secondary activities. Here actually you can provide the linkage between the primary and primary activities and primary and secondary activities. For example, primary activities example, if the operations are not correct, that would also affect the service of the product. And in primary and secondary, actually you can take the example of HRM, which actually affects the operations part. All right. So this is basically the interlinkages which you can write in your answer. Now comes the third part. Third part is basically it is finally what happens for each activity. Finally, the analysis stage comes here at the third stage, and for each activity here, what you would do, you would actually see the areas of improvement where you can improve. Finally, after seeing the linkages and dividing the activities, finally areas of improvement you can see. For example, at different levels in the activities in the value chain, you can find it out. Let us take an example here of the in-housing or outsourcing for something. All right, you can see whether you are outsourcing something, whether it would be better if you are, for example, you are producing something in-house. So you would find that is this thing actually incurring much cost, or it is becoming much costlier. So you can find out the area of improvement. If it is costly, then you can actually outsource it. Here you can cite the example of Apple again, because I told you to stick to one example only. Apple, what Apple does, Apple outsources its operations part, the primary activity to Japan and China, because there the labor cost and the raw material cost is very less. So it basically outsources that. So it has found the areas of improvement after breaking in various parts such activities and then finding out the linkages, and finally they have found out the specific area of their improvement. What else we can do in the analysis? We can find out the cost reduction opportunity, that where can we finally reduce our cost. Similar example. All right, first you tell each of the things and finally give an example of Apple, that outsourcing stuff only, that would be fitting to each and every part of this particular step. All right, next we can find out is the source of competitive advantage. What could be the source of this competitive advantage? All right, so this is basically the three final steps, how the way the value chain analysis is conducted. Right, time and again I'm explaining and I'm repeating it, that please stick to the word limit, and which see that if the question is of 5 marks, you have to explain each and everything. Maybe in half of the page you have to finish your answer. All right, or take one page which is being provided in your answer sheet in the examination hall, and that would be sufficient for your answer, and try to make your answer concise in that manner only. So the basic idea is provide the content, what you know, in the limited number of words. That would actually, help the examiner to get the idea what you want to convey, and try to, improve your answer with the help of diagrams. All right. Now, moving on to our next question, which is strategy follows structure and structure supports the strategy. It has been asked to critically analyze this statement. Again, a 5 marker. All right. So, strategy follows structure and structure supports strategy. See, you can approach this question in 2 ways. First of all, writing this as a heading like strategy follows structure, then you define it, and then you can do it structure supports strategy, then you define it. But that approach would have been better if the question was of some higher marks, maybe 10 or 15 marks. But now, concisely you have to explain like how you want to explain your viewpoint, because you have been asked to critically analyze the statement. That means specifically that you are not supposed to support the statement. You can actually provide points from your personal analysis, that whether you find it to be true, if true to some extent, and if it is not, then to some extent, and you can use mix of both. So this is basically the meaning of critically analyzing the statement. All right. So let us, first of all, understand what it is and how you have to write the exam answer. So you can start with introducing the statement which was been given by Alfred Chandler. What he did is, he actually gave the statement that structure follows strategy. When did he give that? He actually studied various US companies such as DuPont, General Motors, Sears, Standard Oil, etc. And he finally concluded that structure follows strategy. All right. So, but the question is telling us different thing, that strategy follows structure. So here we will start building our answer. You do not have to get confused in this. Now let us first understand the meaning of this term structure follows strategy. See, it is being said by Alfred that changes in the corporate strategies leads to changes in the organizational structure. All right. So whenever there is a change in the strategy, there would also be a need to change the structure. But the question as the statement is given is different. So you do not have to get confused in this. All right. Because this thing actually happens in a way of a cycle. Like structure follows strategy and strategy follows structure. Both way the relationship can be. So you have to write that strategy and structure, they both have reciprocal relationships, and the relationship is such that the structure can flow from the strategy and it can also follow the strategy. All right. That is, structure can actually flow from it, or it can actually follow the selection of the strategy of the firm. This happens in the form of a diagram. Let me explain you it with the help of a diagram. The cycle of this reciprocal relationship. So what happens is, first of all, just a second. So first of all, what happens is a new strategy is created all the time. All right, there is a new strategy a firm introduces, and depending upon that, whenever there is a new strategy, there are always some kind of administrative challenges. So new administrative challenges comes up in the way, emerges, and then the economic, whenever there are difficulties or challenges, the economic performance of the organization, it declines. All right, then it declines, then a new structure is invented, and when a new structure is invented, there are profits that would come. All right, see, we can write profits instead of here, we can write profits here because of the profits come. And when the profits are actually coming, we can again move on to the new strategy, that is it. These are same. So it is basically the cycle that continues. All right. So it is in the form of a cycle. So we call it as a reciprocal relationship. Relationship between the strategy and structure. Now, because we have explained that, see, both of the ways the relationship is open. Strategy follows structure, structure follows strategy. Both are the same things, but we have to substantiate the statement given in the question also. Now we can write first of all, we can help understand this diagram with the help of an example. I'm taking the example which has Chandler given in one of his books, which is a DuPont company. So what happened is actually the company, this company DuPont, it was following a centralized organizational structure because it had a limited product line in which it was working. But later on, it wanted to introduce some new products to its production line, and finally when the new products were introduced, because of that centralized structure of the organization, various kind of complexities started occurring. So to avoid those, what finally they had to do is they had to follow and develop a new structure which was decentralized in nature. So basically through this example you can actually help and make your point clear to the examiner that this is a reciprocal relationship. But now coming back to the question, you can actually state 2 lines supporting the question statement, and then finally conclude it with what you actually think about the statement. All right. So in analyzing the statement given in the question, which is strategy follows the structure, you can actually write the relationship can happen in both the directions, and in the structure influences the strategy direction. In that way, when the structure is influencing the strategy part, what the firm has to do, firm has to see that how well the structure is working in getting the things done, and also it needs to verify that is the structure consistent with the strategy being cited. All right. So one thing is that. Another thing is that organizational structure may vary with different environments. In one environment, structure something can be something else, and in others it can be something else. So the another thing is that organizational structure actually is affected by environments, various environments in which the organization is working, and that would finally influence the organization's strategy in that manner. All right. So this is the way. For example, what was appropriate for Maruti and Tata like 50 years back, it is not relevant today. So there it is basically the role of the environment affecting the organizational structure, and that would in turn affecting the organization strategy. So basically, to support our this thing, that it actually also do that, you can certainly make these 2 points. And then finally, because structure follows strategy, you have actually showed that, and then strategy follows structure, you have actually shown that, and also with these, the help of these 2 points. And finally, you can conclude that various kind of researches which has been done have showed that strategy has much more important influence on the structure than the reverse. So basically, the final idea is that in most of the cases, what has been found is that the strategy is what that influences a firm structure rather than the reverse. Reverse can actually happen, but it has been seen in certain less number of cases basically. So this would be the approach how you would answer this question.